This episode of The Murder in My Family is brought to you by Madison Reed. Madison Reed has hair color that is gorgeous, salon quality, multi-dimensional, ammonia-free, and delivered to your door for less than $25. Visit madison-reed.com for 10% off plus free shipping on your first hair color kit with promo code FAMILY. That's code FAMILY.
You can support this podcast by visiting patreon.com/The Murder in My Family. This episode may contain unsettling material or subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
October is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Please spread the word about that. There's a very good chance that somebody listening to this episode now, or someone you know, is the victim of domestic violence and may not know where to turn. But there is hope. If you or someone you know needs help or support, please call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 or go online to thehotline.org.
Hey, you've reached Kirsten, Braden, and Haven. Leave a message and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
The voice you just heard was that of 30-year-old Kirsten Krasovec. Kirsten was a mother, a daughter, a friend, and unfortunately in 2015, she became a murder victim. Kirsten wasn't killed by a mysterious serial killer. She wasn't the victim of a random crime. She wasn't in the wrong place at the wrong time. Kirsten's life came to an end in her home, the home she shared with her 31-year-old live-in boyfriend, Corey O'Neill Brewer. An intruder didn't break into the home and take Kirsten's life. Instead, the man she shared a bed with, who should have protected her, took Kirsten's life. Sadly, it's an all-too-common scenario, and approximately 80% of murder victims are murdered by somebody that they know. And nearly half of all female victims are killed by intimate partners. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, or NCADV, on average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. During 1 year, this equates to more than 10 million women and men. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have been victims of some form of physical violence by an intimate partner within their lifetime. On a typical day, there are more than 20,000 phone calls placed to domestic violence hotlines nationwide. Intimate partner violence accounts for 15% of all violent crime. 72% of all murder-suicides involve an intimate partner. 94% of the victims of these murder-suicides are female. These statistics are shocking, and although Kirsten's murder is included in these numbers, she was more than a statistic. Kirsten was born and raised in Carson City, Nevada, and had graduated from Carson High School as an honor student. She had been a cheerleader and played clarinet. She loved Disneyland. During her high school years, Kirsten had what might have been a crush on Corey Brewer, who was a fellow student. But after graduating, the two went their separate ways. After graduating, Kirsten had dreams of becoming a pharmacist and took a job as a nationally certified pharmacy technician. By 2012, Kirsten was most of all a proud and happy mother to her 2 young children. Like many moms, those kids were her life. A decade after graduating, Corey Brewer came back into Kirsten's life, and they started a relationship. The pair moved in together. But Kirsten and Corey Brewer had a rocky relationship at times. And unknown to Kirsten's family, Brewer had a violent criminal record. He had been convicted of false imprisonment and domestic battery against his ex-wife, as well as assault with a deadly weapon for placing a loaded gun into the mouth of a former girlfriend. It's unclear if Kirsten knew about Corey's criminal history, but if she did, she kept it a secret from her family. At some point, Corey abused Kirsten for the first time. and it wouldn't be the last. Over time, Kirsten's will was worn down by physical abuse and coercive control. By the time she died, her boyfriend had pretty much broken her and taken everything that she had. Along the way, Kirsten's family noticed changes. Small ones at first, but more noticeable as time went by. From changes in her personality to the way she looked, they sensed that Corey was a controlling man. But there were never any clear-cut instances where the family knew for sure that Kirsten was being abused. And like in many similar cases, Kirsten hid it from family and friends. In July of 2015, the suffering that Kirsten had endured for so long came to an end. At around 7 p.m. on July 5th, Reno, Nevada paramedics and police were summoned via 911 call to the 4000 block of Gardella Avenue to respond to the report of a possible death. Paramedics found Kirsten's lifeless and battered body and declared her dead at the scene. Police started what they called a suspicious death investigation. An autopsy would later be performed on Kirsten's body, and it was determined that she died from asphyxiation and blunt force trauma. Kirsten had suffered extensive injuries to her head, torso, and internal organs. Police immediately suspected Corey Brewer of being responsible for Kirsten's murder. When questioned, he told investigators that he had gone out for a motorcycle ride earlier in the day of the murder and that Kirsten was fine when he left. He then told them that when he came home early that evening, he had discovered Kirsten's body and then called his grandmother, who rushed over to the home. When she saw Kirsten's body, she called 911. Police didn't believe Corey Brewer's story, and they kept pressure on him. Finally, he broke down and admitted that his motorcycle ride story was a fabrication, and that he and Kirsten had used methamphetamine the day of the murder, and that he didn't know exactly how Kirsten had died. Police still didn't believe Brewer, and arrested him on suspicion of murder, as well as firearm-related charges. Brewer went to trial for the murder of Kirsten Krasovec and was found guilty of second-degree murder. In December of 2016, Brewer was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. You heard that right. 10 years for strangling Kirsten to death and for beating her so badly that she had internal injuries. 10 years for the same guy who was a convicted felon with a history of domestic violence, including false imprisonment and for placing a loaded firearm into the mouth of an ex-girlfriend. A young mother was brutally murdered by a weak and cowardly man who had a history of violence. And I use the term man loosely. And there's a chance that he could walk free in 10 years. I can't comprehend that possibility, and I don't have the words to expand on this prison sentence. Instead of me trying to find those words, who better than to speak on behalf of Kirsten than Kirsten's mother, Lori? Lori was kind enough to join me for a discussion about Kirsten's case, and we had a powerful and important conversation about Kirsten and domestic violence. That conversation is next, after this word from our sponsor. The future of at-home hair color is here with Madison Reed. Gorgeous, salon-quality hair color delivered to your door for less than $25. For decades, women have had two options when it came to coloring their hair: outdated at-home hair color or the time and expense of a salon. Madison Reed is reinventing hair color with the quality of salon color, the convenience and affordability of at-home hair color, and an ammonia-free formula made with ingredients you can feel good about. This weekend, my wife will be using Madison Reed to color her hair. And what does that mean for the kids and I? It means we don't have to put up with that harsh, yucky smell of traditional at-home hair color kits. So join the hundreds of thousands of busy women who have tried and loved this life-changing hair color hack. Find your perfect shade at madison-reed.com. And Madison Reed would like to honor the Murder in My Family listeners with 10% off plus free shipping on their first color kit with promo code FAMILY. That's code FAMILY. Visit madison-reed.com today. And now back to the show. Hi, Lori, and welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here to discuss Kirsten's case with us.
Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for having me.
You and I have been, exchanging emails for a while now, and I wanted to get you on because your daughter's case is one that's important because of what it represents, and that's domestic violence. And I wanted to point out in this episode that many murders, most murders, in fact, aren't committed by a random serial killer out in the middle of nowhere. The murders are committed by people close to the victims, and that's true in this case. And I think, because of the domestic violence, we need to remind people of that. And being that October is Domestic Violence Month, this is a very important time to do that.
Yeah, it is. It couldn't have been more perfect than for this to have come out for domestic violence awareness. I think that's needed. People need to be more aware that it's happening, and education. I think people need to be more educated on exactly what domestic violence is. And so I work with a couple of different groups, actually, of advocates here in Carson City and in Reno. And for the entire month of October, we've got quite a lot of events planned, some fun and some somber, to try to raise awareness for this domestic violence.
And I think what we'll do is, as we move along in the episode, we'll come back to that and touch on that, and you can tell us about some of the awesome things you're doing to try and help that situation.
Sure, I would love to do that.
And in this case, your daughter, Kirsten, died at the hands of somebody that was close to her, and that was her own boyfriend.
Yeah.
It's important to let people know that it's far more likely, as I said before, that your mom, wife, sister, daughter will be the murder victim through domestic violence. And I should clarify that it can happen to men too, but quite often, unfortunately, it's women that we see in this situation.
Yep, the majority of them are women, so that's just a fact.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, and I think that speaks volumes about the kind of people, the abusers that do this, that they pick on somebody that they think are weaker or they can do it to without any kind of repercussions, or and I think that shows what kind of small person they actually are.
It definitely is. It's a pattern. Most abusers, by the time a woman is killed, this person has abused more than one woman. And they get off. They don't get arrested, or they do, and they don't get prosecuted. Or in our case, Kirsten wasn't the first. Actually, she was the third. And we didn't know about that until after she died. But he spent 3 years in prison for doing the exact same thing he did to her that he did to Kirsten, he did to his ex-wife, except for she didn't die. And so he spent 3 years in prison for that, and he was let out. The parole board said he's not a danger to society. And 3 years later, Kirsten was dead. So obviously, there's a mindset there where they know how to tell people what they need to hear so they can continue abusing.
And I think you hit the nail right on the head. There's seems to be a pattern. The kind of people that do these things, it's not an isolated incident. So
right.
It happens and it forms a pattern, and these kind of people will do it again. And I think we hear and see in so many cases that the women, again, it's mostly women, but I don't want to leave men out because men can be victims too, but mostly women, they will stick by these people that do that to them, and they say, well, he'll change, or it was an accident, or he was drinking. And it seems like sometimes they are stuck in that cycle. Was that the case for Kirsten, do you know?
You know what? Yes, it was. That was absolutely the case for her. She's always been a fixer. She always thought that she could fix people. And if I just love him enough, it'll be okay. So that was the case for her. But then it's not just her, though. It's probably many abused women. They get in this cycle, and they can't break free. Because, you know what? The best thing that ever happened to me after Kirsten died was I made friends with his ex-wife. She contacted me on Facebook, and we started talking, and we became friends. And she explained to me, like nobody else could, how Kirsten got stuck in this cycle. She explained to me the type of person that this man was and how he kept her there. And that helped me tremendously to understand what Kirsten was going through, why she hadn't left earlier, why she didn't confide in her friends and family about what was going on. It was huge for me to be able to talk to somebody that had been there. But it's coercive control plays a huge part in what these women go through. The men control them completely. Sometimes it's with food. Sometimes it's with their freedom. It's certainly with their money. By the time Kirsten died, she had nothing left in her name, we found out. Not even her car. He even took her car. And everything was in his name. She didn't have anything. So had she left, she would have left without anything. A lot of times he used her children against her. She has 2 children. She had 2 children. He would use them against her, threaten violence with them. He had complete control over her in that way, and she was absolutely terrified to make a wrong step in any direction because she knew that he would hurt her again or that he would hurt her kids or us. The most awful thing, she left him 2 weeks before he killed her. She left him and went to my dad's house. And one morning and we didn't realize that because it was late at night when she went to my dad's and we hadn't talked to her yet. And so the next morning we were looking out, it's about 6 o'clock in the morning, and he's sitting outside of our house on his motorcycle taking pictures. And we had asked him to cut down a tree for us, so I just assumed that he was taking pictures of the tree, getting ready to come over and cut it down. And we found out later that he was texting Kirsten. He was taking pictures of our house and of us, saying, "I'm outside your parents' house. If you don't come back, I'm going to kill your parents." And so she went back to him because she thought she was protecting us. But that's the type of power that these men wield over these women.
So he
and
used... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and that's even more hurtful. And that took me a longer time to understand because, it's like, Kirsten, we're your parents. We can take care of ourselves. But she believed so much that he would hurt us that she was willing to be hurt for us. That's heartbreaking.
So he put that fear in her that slowly caused her to get under his influence to where he could control her with different threats and things like that. Right.
In addition to the beating she took over the years. Again, we really didn't know. No, that's not fair. I knew that there was something wrong. You could tell by the change in her personality, her looks even. Everything about her changed in the way that she acted towards me and her dad. For the longest time, she lived right across the street from us. Her and her kids lived right across the street from us. And then he came in, and God, within a year, he had moved her to another town. And so we knew then that he was very controlling, although I didn't realize how abusive he was at the time. I would look at her every time she did come over, and I never saw bruises, but I could tell the change in her personality. But it was, again, after she died, once the kids found out that he was in jail and couldn't hurt them anymore, they started to talk. And that's how we found out about most of the stuff that went on. And that's still, I still don't even like to think about some of the things that they told us that they witnessed and that she went through. And she just never told anyone.
And you mentioned jail, and I want to bring this part up because this is one of the most awful parts of this case is what happened sentence-wise for what he did. And I just want to get this out of the way so I can say his name one time and not say it again, because I just think he's despicable.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we never say his name.
Yeah, and just for the listeners, I'm going to say it one time here with you, and then we're not going to mention it again. But his name, of course, is Corey O'Neill Brewer. I was angry when I read that he got life imprisonment with a chance of parole after only 10 years. Is that correct?
That's correct. That so many people were angry. Once that hit social media, people were livid. I think there was about 3 or 4 different articles, and there were hundreds of comments about his sentence. And I took the time to answer every single one of them I could, because it's 10 years. It's a life in prison, possibility of parole after 10 years. But after 10 years or 7 or whatever is left now, we can go to his parole hearing as family members and make an impact statement and talk to the parole board and keep him from getting out. So that's something that we'll do every 10 years or however many years when he comes up. We'll make a trip to the other side of the state to where he's at, and we'll tell the parole board, look, the last time you guys let him out, it took him 3 years before he killed somebody. Don't let him out again. And usually that has a big impact on the board, and if family members show up that way, they don't get parole. So we should be able to keep him in there for a long, long time.
Yeah,
so that was one of the reasons why we were okay with the sentence. We were fine with it because ideally just plain old life in prison would have been the best. But by taking this deal, we didn't have to go to court. We didn't have to sit through a trial and see the pictures of Kirsten. We didn't, the kids didn't have to testify or say anything. So it was the best for us and for her children.
And I read it twice because I just felt, I read the details of what he did to her, and he pummeled her, he suffocated her, she had internal damage, and I just wonder how. It boggles my mind that somebody can possibly, you're going to fight that, but possibly get out after 10 years after that. It's scary. There's people probably in prison for very minor charges related to marijuana or something that are looking at the same kind of time. It's mind boggling when I saw what he, the sentence he got.
He did. To make it worse, I'm sorry. She was beaten so badly that the funeral director begged us not to look at her before we had her cremated. He said he'd never done that in all of his years as being a funeral director. He's never asked a family to do that, but he begged us, just don't look at her, just let us cremate her so you don't have to see it. That's how bad it was. So, yeah, in the scheme of things, you're absolutely right. When you think about someone with a marijuana charge getting more time, in that perspective, it's awful. Though, again, that just goes to the way that our society views domestic violence. It's hard for prosecutors to prosecute a domestic violence case, and they don't really want to do it if they're not going to win. Worst case scenario would have been that we prosecuted and went for life in prison, and he walked, because that's always a possibility. Because in a case where someone is murdered and there were only 2 people there, there's only one person left to tell what happened. And the story that he told of what happened was horrible. It was all her fault. She was very high on methamphetamines. All day long, she just wouldn't stop smoking methamphetamines. And then he left, and he didn't know what happened to her, and he doesn't remember anything else. And, and that's his story. And there's nobody to say it didn't happen. The coroner did tell us, there's a word for it, Mike, and I'm sorry, but I can't remember what it is. But for methamphetamine intoxication, like for a DUI, it's a .08 and you're legally drunk. Well, there's a cutoff point for methamphetamines as well. And the amount that was in her body was the equivalent of being 12 times over the amount of legal intoxication for alcohol. So 0.08 times 12. Imagine being that drunk. I don't even know if she was aware of anything that was going on around her. The coroner did say that there's no way a person can do that to themselves. It's just not possible. It was like if you were drunk and passed out and you just kept drinking. It's the same thing. I do know that on two previous occasions, thanks to his ex-wife, he has shot her up. His ex-wife, he shot her up twice with methamphetamines when she was unconscious after he beat her, and then another time when she was trying to fight him, when she was trying to leave him. And you can say that as much as you want, but if he says it didn't happen, there's nobody to say this is what happened. So you're starting at a disadvantage because you've got this person that's high on drugs, and so it must have been her fault. And this is a perception that you run into with domestic violence. The victim ends up getting blamed a lot.
And that's classic victim blaming or victim shaming, and that's what we see a lot, unfortunately, in some of these cases. And that's, it is. When survivors that don't wind up losing their lives go to court to testify, they find themselves on trial. Right. Why did you have drugs, or why did you sleep with X amount of guys before him? I mean, there's so many different ways that victims can find themselves being blamed or shamed, and this is it's just too common. And
it is. These cases are very hard to prosecute because of the public perception of domestic violence. I'm sorry to say it, but it's the truth. Now, I think that they should still prosecute. You can't let these people off, but we need a new education all around as far as this is concerned. What I keep thinking of is when I was in high school, this was in the late 70s, early 80s, I had a friend, and her father used to beat her quite badly, quite often. And she would come to school with bruises all over her body, on her face. And one time she had 2 black eyes, and one teacher pulled her out of class and asked her if she was okay and what was going on. But nothing ever happened after that. That was the only time anybody showed her that they saw what was happening. Now, that would never happen today, ever. The first time a kid came to school with a black eye, immediately people would be called and they would be talked to. And so it's just a matter of letting everybody know this is not okay. We have to do something. If you see something, you say something. This is against the law with domestic violence, as well as like we had done with child abuse.
And from a legal standpoint, I just want to touch on one thing again. Do you know why it was a second-degree murder versus a first-degree murder?
It was let's see. First degree is premeditated, right?
Yeah.
You can't prove intent. Premeditation. Yeah. You can't prove intent. You can't prove any of that. Again, there were 2 people, and one is dead. So the one left gets to tell the story.
Yeah, and you say story. That's a good term for it, because even if he was defending himself, he could have hit her once and left just to get away if that was his true story. But the beating that she had is just that's not a defensive. Let me get away from you to protect myself. That's I want to beat you to death. And I just it's still. It must be frustrating for you, because it was frustrating for me just to read it, and I had to read it like 3 times to make sure I wasn't missing something. I hope that's a law that can be changed someday, and that some of these crimes, they'll find a way to prosecute them with stiffer sentences. Right.
Exactly. And it can be done, and it should be done. She's a serial abuser. And it's all well documented in the court cases. But what we found is that nothing that he had done prior to this could be brought up in court, because it wasn't fair to him, because that's what he did before. And that was just something we were constantly knocking our heads against. Why? He did exactly the same thing before. He's done this. We have documents. Why, if we go to trial, can't the jury see this? And we finally ended up hiring a lawyer. The district attorneys are so busy, and they answer as many questions as they can for you in the little bit of time that they have. And we felt like we didn't understand the justice system. So we went out and hired a lawyer to talk to us, to sit down with us for an hour and talk to us and explain to us why. Why does this work this way? And basically that's it. You can't bring up any priors because that's not fair to him. All you can judge him on is what you're looking at here. This is all you've got. This is the evidence you've got, and this is all you can judge him on. And so I happened to ask the lawyer, I said, well, what about sexual predators? Why can you bring up their past? And he said, because they're on a list. We have a sexual offenders list. And because that list is public, then it can be brought up in court. And so that made me think, well, we need a list then for serial domestic abusers, obviously, because people are falling through the cracks. Had a jury been able to see what he had done before, any of his priors, then it would have been a slam dunk. They would have realized, oh, this wasn't just a one-time thing that this man, I hesitate to use that word, but that this man did. They would have realized that there was a pattern there. So it's our justice system is geared towards making sure that guilty people don't get put in prison. And I understand that and I agree with it, but at times like this, it's very frustrating as well.
Especially when you're the family member of the victim. It's if I'm mad about it and I didn't know your daughter, you must be just beside yourself. And I can't even put myself in your shoes to know how that feels. But, I hope that's something that can be changed, and maybe through some of your efforts and other people like you, you can make some of those changes.
We have to keep trying. You have to keep talking about it. The conversation has to be started, and you can't stop until it's looked at as the crime that it is.
Yeah, and people, they need to accept that when this happens one time, it's not just one time. There's a series of events like this in these abusers' past most of the time. And
most of the time,
that needs to be taken into consideration, because like you hit the nail on the head. It's a leopard can't change its spots, and somebody that would do this to one person and then another is bound to do it again if they're given the opportunity.
Yes. And that is the long and short of it. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. It's never just a one-off thing.
And let me ask you something as a parent. As a parent, we want the best for our kids. We want them to meet people that are going to be good for them and kind to them and protecting of them. Did you have, looking back now, did you have any kind of feelings as a parent that something was off? Do you regret not acting on something or not asking a question here and there to try and get more information? Do you ever feel that you may have missed something that might have helped stop this?
I failed her so badly. In hindsight, I can see it all now. It was about 3 or 4 months after she died, I stumbled across Laura Richards, and I started listening to her and the things that she said about domestic violence and coercive control and gaslighting. And it made so much sense then. All of a sudden, I understood. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what to say to her. But absolutely. Looking back on it now, I would have spent less time being hurt by some of the things that she had said or done, and more time realizing this isn't Kirsten. This is not something that she would do. What's going on? And more time talking to her in a different way than I did, rather than just being upset with her because she didn't make it for my dad's birthday dinner. Why didn't she make it? And maybe understanding that he was controlling her. And this is her way of maybe not getting beat again, by saying, oh, yeah, you don't want to go to my grandpa's birthday party, then we won't go. I did everything wrong. I did absolutely everything wrong. And I think that's another reason why I speak out so much, is that it wasn't intentional. I was just uneducated.
And now you've had to become educated after the fact and try and help other people from going through this.
Right.
And you mentioned Laura Richards. Have you reached out to her?
Yeah, actually, I talked to Laura quite a lot. I reached out to her in the very beginning. Well, no, right after the sentencing. The judge in this case was phenomenal. After the sentencing was over and he left, the courtroom was packed. About 100 or so people in there, and everyone wore purple for domestic violence. And she asked everyone in purple to please stay behind after him and his family and they had all left. And she said something to the effect of, it's good to see you all here supporting domestic violence, but don't let this end here in this courtroom. If you really believe in what you're here today representing, take it out of the courtroom. Go and do something about it. It's something that needs to be addressed. And I think at that point, that's when I first reached out to Laura Richards. And I told her what the judge had said. And she's fantastic. She emailed me back, and we've been talking quite a lot. In fact, I'm trying to get her to come here to Nevada to do some training with our law enforcement, and anybody who works with domestic violence victims should listen to Laura Richards, because she's so smart and she understands so well what's going on.
So I've met her and worked with her a little bit, and she is fantastic to have in your corner. And for listeners out there, in case they don't know who she is, she's an expert in the area of stalking and abuse, and she's fantastic. So for her to be on your team, that's gotta only help you.
It helps. It helps so much. She explains so much to me. And she talks to me, and I told her pretty much what I told you about how bad I feel about how everything went. And she takes the time to talk to me and, talk me through it and let me know it's okay. And let's move forward and let's change this. So I adore her.
Yeah. And let's shift to something positive. Let's talk a little bit about some of the efforts that you are putting in to try and change the narrative in these kind of cases. What steps are you taking and trying to put through to change, whether it's abuse from happening in the first place or tougher sentencing after something happens? Can you tell us a little bit about your efforts and what you've got planned to try and change that?
My efforts are focused solely on education. I think that education is crucial. Anyone who works with domestic violence victims should be educated in coercive control, stalking, domestic violence, anything like that to make you understand what you're dealing with. You usually, say you're a police officer and you get a call to go to a domestic violence situation. You get one chance with the victim. You get one chance to ask the right question. And if you don't ask the right question, she'll close off from you. Immediately, you become the enemy. You don't believe her. You're ridiculing her. You're making fun of her. Whatever it is she's telling herself so that she doesn't open up to you, then you've lost her completely. At that point, she won't press charges. She won't say anything else. But if you can walk in there with a list of the right questions and how to ask them, then you can gain her trust. And once you gain her trust, everything else is so much easier. All of this is entailed, Laura Richards, again, of course. She has, it's called the Dash Risk Checklist. And she's spent years honing these questions so that you can assess when you walk in, what is the risk to the woman who's here right now? How much of a risk is her partner that's there with her? And then you have a better chance of acting accordingly. right now, a lot of places, all they do is hand the woman the phone number for the nearest domestic violence hotline or shelter, and then they walk out and she's left there with the man that she just called the police on. Next time she's not going to call the police because they didn't help, and then the next time she might be dead. So it's education from the very beginning is what I'm working on. Prevention through education. So I'm trying to get everybody on board to bring Laura here to Nevada to not only educate on the DASH checklist, but also on coercive control, which plays such a huge part in all of it. And stalking, we need to update our stalking laws. They're antiquated. They don't involve anything to do with social media, texting, any of that stuff. So that's what I'm working on for long term.
And is this something that you think you can change locally in your area, or do you think this can have a broader reach, across the United States?
I think it has to start locally. Nevada is number 2 in the nation for domestic violence murders. And if we can do this, if we can start in our little area of Nevada, and it's successful, and let's say it moves down into Las Vegas, which is huge, and we can implement it there and it's successful, all of a sudden, Nevada is not number 2 anymore. They're number 8 or 9. Other states are going to start looking at that and say, what did they do? And I think that's how we make it more of a national thing.
By setting an example for others to follow.
Right. That's my goal right now.
Yeah,
start with my own little area of the United States, and let's get it started, and then let's see how it rolls from there.
Well, that's how it starts too. You take a step, and then somebody else sees what you're doing, and then they do it, and then it spreads, and hopefully there's some change that's affected by that.
That's my hope.
And I want to touch back on a couple things regarding Kirsten. You mentioned she had children, and that's they're victims as well now too. And that's sometimes in these cases that gets overlooked, but they lost their mother. How is their situation right now?
They are better. There was quite a bit of counseling in the beginning. He was not their father. Their father lives in Arizona, and he just wasn't in a place to take the kids. They don't really know him that well. And like I said, for the longest time, they lived right across the street from us, so they grew up with us, and they know us very well. We were their second home. So it was natural for them to come here, where they felt comfortable, where they felt safe, finally. A lot of counseling. The boy is older. He took most of the abuse as well and saw most of the abuse, so he's been a little bit tougher. The girl was 7 when her mom died, so she was a little bit younger. She had a little bit easier time with it, but it's been tough. But they're doing all right. They're getting better every day.
And hopefully there's no long-term, hopefully they can recover from it. But even if they recover from the abuse that they witnessed and that they know about, it's not going to bring back their mom. So
no.
That's a life-changing event for them going forward. So he touched multiple lives by doing that to your daughter. And that's something that's important not to forget that.
There's always a ripple effect. Domestic
Exactly.
abuse has a huge ripple effect.
Well, one thing I want to do to sort of close out is rather than talk about the negative and how Kirsten's life ended, tell us a little bit about your good memories of her and who she was as a person.
She was a sweetheart. She honestly was the nicest, kindest person that you would ever meet. She, after she died, that the first words out of anybody's mouth about her was that she was the nicest, kindest person you've ever met. Had a smile for everybody. if you needed anything, she was always there for you, and she just radiated. She radiated light. I have to laugh because I have to say that stuff too because I'm her mom. But I think as her mom, I could also tell you she had a wicked, raunchy sense of humor. Just at times she would post things on Facebook, dirty jokes. And I would be having heart palpitations getting to the phone in time to tell her, take that down, your grandparents can see this. And she would just laugh at me. She didn't care. She thought it was funny, and she would laugh. And I did. I think she gave me about 1 million heart attacks. She was a lot of fun. She could be stubborn. And I think what I always think of the most is I think every family has something. When you do something wrong, there's the name thing. Like in our family, it's the 3 names, first, middle, last. If you do something inappropriate or that I think you shouldn't have said, it's first, middle, and last name. And so she would get the biggest kick out of when her dad, if he would say something and I would turn around and give him his 3 names, she would put one hand over her stomach and the other hand would be pointing at her dad. And she had this laugh, this like a chortle type thing. Do you remember? It reminded me of, way back in, I think it was the late 60s, Hanna-Barbera cartoons.
Oh yeah.
They had this. It was called Wacky Races, and there was this dog, and his name was Muttley. Look it up if you don't remember it. Look up that laugh. She would do that, and she would laugh at her dad in this raspy chortle of a laugh, and it would crack me up. She was a lot of fun. She was fun.
I hope that those are the memories that you hold on to and not the bad memories of what happened at the end of her life, but her life itself. And I hope that's something that you can do and not dwell on the other stuff.
It's, you know what, Mike, it's getting there. You laugh more at stuff like that than you cry as each day goes. You laugh more. Probably in the beginning I would have cried thinking about that silly Muttley dog. But now I laugh. So
and they say laughter's the best medicine, and hopefully that's true. Hopefully that a little laughing here and there will help to ease what you've gone through. Yeah,
it does. It does help.
And as we close out, I just want to say there's a good chance statistically that somebody out there listening is going through some kind of abuse, domestic abuse, or their loved one is going through domestic abuse. What advice would you share with them, based on your experience, if there's somebody out there listening to you right now that needs help or doesn't know what to do?
I would, if you're, there's actually a few different things that's okay. Believe it or not, some women don't really understand that they're being abused because it doesn't start off physical. It starts off more mental. So if you think that maybe something is wrong in your relationship, I would go online and I would go look up the Flora Richards and the dash risk checklist. I don't know why that's so hard to say. And just take it for yourself. Look at the questions and answer yes or no for yourself. And that'll give you a good idea of if your relationship is going to become abusive. Because that's, if you can get out before it gets that bad, if the warning signs are there but you're not sure, this could help you make the decision. Or take it with a friend. Have a friend give you the questions to talk about. That's good as well. Then, of course, if you're already in that situation, there's the National Domestic Violence Hotline. It is, I'll give you the number, 1-800-799-SAFE or 1-800-799-7233. If you're thinking about leaving a relationship, please call these people before you do. You need a plan in order to get out safely, and they can help you. I don't know if I mentioned this during all of this, but Kirsten was leaving him that weekend when he killed her. The kids were up at Lake Tahoe with my dad, And she decided to leave while the kids were gone, thank God, because we were sure he would have killed the children, too, if they had been there. But she didn't have a plan. She didn't call anyone for help. So if anyone's thinking of leaving, call the domestic violence hotline first. They'll put you in touch with somebody in your area that can help you. And I promise they won't be judgmental. They'll understand what you're going through, and it's okay to call. And the one that I can talk about most would probably be to other parents who have a daughter going through this. You learn about coercive control. Try not to be hurt, because what she's doing is not a reflection of you or your relationship. It's a reflection of what she's going through. And the best way to help is just to be loving to her, even when she's not loving to you, and be there. And in the end, hopefully she'll call you for help. You know, if you don't let her push you away when she's trying to or being forced to, then maybe in the end she'll call you for help, and you'll have a different outcome than me. But it takes a big education to realize exactly what's going on. It's so much different than what you think.
And that's really good advice. And if anybody out there is going through this situation, please take advantage of those phone numbers. Please call somebody. There is help out there for you. That's one message I wanted to get across in this episode. And I appreciate you helping me get that message across, Lori.
There is help. And it's hard. You're asking someone to share their worst secret and their best kept secret, and not be judged for it. And it's hard for these women. So I think it is important to know that these organizations, they won't judge you, and they'll help you, and it'll be okay.
And that's the perfect part of this episode to wrap up and on a positive message. Unfortunately, it can't change what you've been through, but hopefully we can change it for somebody else out there if they're listening to this and they're in the same situation.
That would be my greatest hope.
And Lori, I can't thank you enough for joining us. I mean, it's an important topic of conversation. It's one that we all need to be part of in some way and help spread that message. And I appreciate you coming on to help do that and talk about Kirsten's case. Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Murder of My Family. If you enjoy this podcast, please take a moment to rate and review it on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts so that the show can continue to reach new listeners. To learn more about the show or the cases we discuss, please visit themurderinmyfamily.com. You can also find us on Twitter with the handle @MurderInMyFam or by searching for the Murder in My Family podcast on Facebook. If you'd like to support the show on Patreon, it's always appreciated. And you can do so by visiting patreon.com/themurderinmyfamily. If you prefer to, you can also support the show through a PayPal donation by visiting paypal.me/themurderinmyfamily. In each episode, I'll give shout-outs to any new supporters. In this episode, I'd like to thank Jamie Rice, who happens to host the awesome true crime podcast, Murderish. And thanks to all of the supporters that generously donate and keep the podcast going. Your support is appreciated and helps the show grow and improve. As we wrap up this episode, be sure to check out previews for 2 true crime podcasts that I enjoy, and I think you will too. The first is Southern Fried True Crime, and the second is Swindled. Until next time, remember, every murder victim means something to somebody.
If you would like to discuss the murder in your family on this podcast, please be sure to visit themurderinmyfamily.com for more information.
Hey there, this is Erica Kelly, host of the podcast Southern Fried True Crime. Each week, I take a look at a different Southern crime, and like any good gossip, I'm interested in anyone or anything. I cover contemporary and historical cases, and I love listener suggestions. Come join me as I explore the dark underbelly of the Deep South. I'm a one-woman show in a narrative format, kind of like sitting by the fire and listening to a story. So pull up a chair and subscribe if you're interested. I'd love to have you. You can find me on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and just about any podcast platform. Just search for Southern Fried True Crime. Until then, y'all take care.
Over 40 years, Hooker Chemical Corporation dumped over 80 toxic substances at Love Canal.
There is substantial medical opinion that continued use of the Dalcon shield may pose a serious personal health hazard.
Oh, I hate all of you! I hate you!
He's accused of orchestrating the largest lotto scam ever.
In opening arguments, prosecutor Jerry Miller portrayed Baker as a greedy, money-hungry showman who practiced fraud disguised as religion.
Martin Shkreli has become the most hated man in America.
My kid's not here! He's dead! Because of him! He ruined my life!
Swindled is a podcast that uses narrative storytelling, archival audio, and immersive soundscapes to explore true cases of white-collar crime and corporate greed. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever else you may get your podcasts. For more information about the show, visit our website at swindledpodcasts.com.